On today's episode of Locked On Suns, an announcement about a new regular contributor on the program, a walkthrough, an incredible win over the Cleveland Cavaliers, and what the past couple W's have shown us about the Suns' progress down the stretch of the season on both ends. Let's go.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We are back. This is Locked On Phoenix Suns. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Brendon Kleen, a credentialed media member covering the Suns for the past 7 seasons, a writer at Dime Magazine, the host of the Just Basketball Show, wherever you get your podcasts, and of course, I also create written and video content for the Locked On Suns Insiders, which you can sign up and join at the link in the show description below. Thank you for making Locked On Suns your first listen here on this Friday. Another Suns game day, another Suns home game day after 2 W's now in a row. Wherever you're finding the show, don't forget to hit follow or subscribe. We are free and available everywhere, including YouTube. So when you hit that button, you get an episode in your feed every single Monday through Friday from here through August. Basically, for as long as you're going to keep track, I will commit to having an episode for you every day. Become an everydayer. Get locked onto the Phoenix Suns all season long. That's your job. My job is to make the content, and we do that for you. Today's episode is jam-packed. We have an announcement to kick things off, which is that Stephen PridGeon, who is my guest today, a writer at Bright Side of the Sun, does some work at PHNX, does some work at CHGO, which we were just chatting about on the WNBA side of things before we hit record here, Stephen. But adding to the resume, adding to this show's schedule is 1 episode per week with Stephen. Super excited to get this going, heading into the playoffs. Super excited to have another smart basketball person who cares a lot about the Suns, watches these games just as closely as anybody, to come on and talk Suns every week and hopefully give the audience, all the everydayers who are out there, a lot of good stuff to chew on. So thank you, Stephen. It's exciting.
Thank you, my man. I really appreciate the opportunity, and I'm looking to obviously connect further with you, but also just grow through speaking on the game with somebody that kind of sees things a little differently at times and just generally continue to, like you said, stack opportunities and just stack reps doing this thing. So I appreciate you. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it. We'll go through a little bit of Stephen's Suns background, which I don't even know the story of, to wrap up the show, but we have a game to get to and some basketball to talk before then, so we will not waste any more time before we get to it. 122-101 was the final score Wednesday night. I did not do a recap show because it was my birthday. I was at the arena as a fan, which I have not done in 6 years, so that was very cool and very fun to be a part of and get to spend some time with friends instead of working. So this is basically a recap of that game, and it was an awesome win. But let's specifically focus on the offense, Stephen, which was, I thought, this very similar to the last Cleveland game, which I probably would have said was one of the best offensive process games the Suns had up to now. I would put this one in that category as well. It just felt like, given that, somebody like an Evan Mobley, even somebody like a Jared Allen, pose some matchup difficulties, combined with the way that we know the Suns can get in their own way at times, it felt like they just solved both of those problems. The ball did not stick at all. I would say it was one of the best ball movement games of the season. The turnovers, probably just part of what you have to build into this offense. They did turn it over 15 times, but I loved what we saw, and you look up and it's 72 combined from Book and KD. How do you feel like this game kind of progressed forward from what we've seen from the offense lately, and what stuck out to you?
Well, I think, for one, you can live with the turnovers when the assist total is that high. And, I mean, you've lamented over it, written and on podcast format. So have I, and even on the timeline in terms of when the assist totals are high, that's when this team is optimized, because that means the ball's moving around. Most of the possessions are ending on field goals that are assisted by, rather than it be isolation where the ball is sticking, which is obviously adverse to everything that they're trying to build towards. So I think kind of looking at it from the lens and the context of the Cleveland Cavaliers, they have, like you mentioned, Jared Allen and Evan Mobley in their front court. And those two particular front court teammates can not just guard well, but they can also switch actions and be interchangeable, not just 4-5 or 5-4 actions, but they can both guard down and do so effectively in space. And we saw them bet with that gambit on a handful of the actions that we're starting to see the Suns get into a little bit more in this window prior to the playoffs. A lot of ram screens being set for the Suns, which is just a screen for the eventual person that's going to ultimately set a screen on ball. And as they get into those actions, and whether it's veer that they get into, which is that screener then send the screen off the ball after pick and roll, or Spain pick and roll, Mobley and Allen are able to switch those things, kind of just takes away some of the tempo and some of the movement from the Suns in those actions. So seeing them process through that and do so effectively was very interesting.
So agreed. And you saw early, right, to give a more specific example too, of the first couple scoring opportunities KD had. I think he had an ISO up top against Jared Allen off of a switch. He had a drive where he kind of got stuck, and I'm not a personal fan of the static KD possessions. I think they can work when he's in rhythm, when he has a feel for the defender that might be on him, or obviously when he has a mismatch, but just the give it to KD and have him kind of drive or create or whatever. I think at this age, that's not a great plan given how many great options the Suns have. And so they were able to not make so many mistakes on their way to figuring out other ways to get him involved, transition, spot ups, finding those mismatches, creating them with some of the sets that you talked about. So I really liked it, but it spoke to me as a continuation of, I mean this, not as snide as it might sound, but they've just been running more stuff lately. And that is going to be the best way to avoid those static possessions, to, keep the assist numbers high, to generate threes for everybody, but especially to kind of maximize the role players and even just create easy opportunities for the stars and not make it so difficult. So I liked that this game continued that trend. But what it made me start to wonder, because at the end of the day, you do look at it and it's 9 shot attempts for Beal. And, the Grayson factor, which we'll get into as we talk about how good Royce looked in this game in the next segment. But how do you think about the kind of pecking order and hierarchy for this group? Do you think about it in those terms, or do you think about it more from the offensive structure and just kind of taking what that provides? Because we also have seen the trend of Beal taking a lot fewer shots lately, and frankly, to me, Durant looking a lot more like he kind of looked in last year's playoffs when we were all scratching our heads of like, is he a decoy? Or did they not have enough time to integrate him? And it's not exactly like that, but there's been a lot of possessions where he is sort of that spot up off ball guy. So I'm not kind of saying good or bad on any of that, but I guess just as an open-ended thing, do you feel like we're seeing a hierarchy, or do you just think this is what this week has looked like? Next week might be different because it's all about the process.
Yeah, I think that's a good question, and I think it speaks to where specifically the big three are evolving in their process and performing all with each other in the lineup, which is obviously when this team is optimized. I feel like I wouldn't use the word hierarchy just because that feels more tiering and,
Yeah.
I think it's more
toxic. It feels more toxic.
It feels more Twitter conversation,
yeah,
with hot words and all that fun stuff. But no, I feel like it's more organization. So obviously, post All-Star break, especially in that stretch where Book was out with the ankle injury, we saw Bradley Beal get into a whole lot more of initiating of offense, and that trend has not broken its rhythm since Devin Booker returned to the lineup. That was something I was looking for in the first couple of games. And that trend is certainly sustained. And I think it's important because now when you're allowing Devin Booker to work in movement before getting into ultimately if it's pick and roll or whatever the case may be in terms of action, it's different versus him bringing the ball to the floor. Now he's stagnant. So is his opponent. And they're just sitting there waiting to load up and navigate screens and communicate with the defense and all of that. It adds a little bit, just the slightest bit more nuance to the attack. In addition to Bradley Beal just abundantly being a downhill threat, regardless of wherever he has the ball in his hands. Defense has a load up in some capacity for it, and it keeps the person on ball on their toes. And it just gives the offense a little bit different of an organization from the onset. And I think it trickles down into obviously Kevin Durant being involved in movement and Bradley Beal as well once he passes it out, or if he's not putting pressure on the paint to get the ball rolling from there. I think all of those little pieces organization-wise just help to bring them a little more in alignment with where they want to be on offense.
I like the word organization. I would even also add the kind of idea of it just feels like everybody's mentality is a little more specific now, right? Like Beal being able to know, the offense is going to be set up for me to drive downhill, whether I'm working the ball up and that's going to be a pick and roll where I'm just, initiating, collapsing the defense and getting things started, or I'm going to be coming off a screen. Whatever that situation might be, transition, my mentality is going to be to get downhill, and I'm going to trust the coaching staff and my teammates to get me in position to do that. KD, it's probably a little more varied because he can do it all, but I think less of those static possessions and, okay, if I'm not going to be ISOing, I need to be ready to attack. I think his aggressiveness was really good last night. And then for Book, I think the role might have probably stayed the same, but I think knowing kind of what he's supposed to be setting up as the quote-unquote point guard of the team or the guy with the ball in his hands probably the most out of anybody as that initiator. Well, now he's kind of being able to say, all right, well, if that's what each of these other dudes is doing, well, my job's to get them in position to do that. He obviously is off ball plenty as well and can do his thing. He's been taking more pull-up threes lately. He's been a little more aggressive in transition, I feel like, and those are always good signs for him. So I think we could have done 30 minutes on this, but we're going to have to part ways with this topic and jump into Royce O'Neale because he was awesome in another starting opportunity. Stephen and I have both been beating the drum for him to play more minutes with this group, potentially get locked into an actual starting spot long term. Did we get closer to that happening? If not, we'll at least hype up why it looks so good coming up next. First, today's show brought to you by Robinhood. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can also have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on that 3% match, and Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th, so get started at Robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal info. Claim as of Q1 2024, validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% matching on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC, is a registered broker-dealer. All right, keeping things rolling. Royce O'Neale gets the starting nod for Grayson Allen, who dealing with kind of just a pain management situation from what it sounded like with Grayson Allen's hip. Frank Vogel explained pregame that it's something he's dealt with basically his whole career, and it's really just something he needs to kind of rest at times. TBD on if that affects him. I wouldn't expect it to. That probably opens up some questions about, Royce's future, but let's start with the game he played first, Stephen, before we get into that. 17 points, 6 rebounds, 6 of 9 from the field, got up some threes. In this case, made a lot of them. We know he can be streaky, but they were wide open. He cashed in on those and had the primary assignment, a lot of possessions of starting out on Mitchell or even Garland. Kind of did everything you would want a forward wing option in a starting group around stars to do. What do you like best about the way Royce fits with these guys? What's the part of it that really feels like the most valuable thing?
Yeah, for me with Royce, the thing that popped up off the film when just kind of looking at how he could integrate himself into the Suns context, it was his IQ, the quick processing, the ability to see things develop and have a feel for the game that allows for you to react a little bit quicker than, not to obviously compare him to other pieces on the Suns, but just speak generally. for him to be more preemptive with the things that he's doing on the floor than it is moving in reactions to things. And especially in the space that you're playing in defensively in today's NBA, whether that's coming preemptively in communication or preemptively in terms of positioning, those two things are completely invaluable. You get all of that in addition to a bump up in size and versatility in terms of guarding multiple positions when Royce O'Neale is on the floor. And I think those things, in tandem with everything that Nurkic brings, in tandem with everything that Kevin Durant brings, I think it fits for the team in terms of just creating more lineup balance and starting with a more balanced iteration of a starting lineup. And then obviously being able to sprinkle in the multitude of pyrotechnics and movement that Grayson Allen sprinkles in on offense, and just kind of letting things kind of be a little bit more organized and aligned in that respect. I don't think it's a change that absolutely has to happen. I think it's really great that they have optionality, but I think it might be, from my perspective, just a little bit more curiosity, just seeing with more minutes what Royce O'Neale looks like with that specific starting unit.
I think that's a good way to put it, right? Because you just saw and heard the way that KD specifically loves playing with him, right? And I do think there is something about him being out there that over the course of last season in Brooklyn and then just coming to Phoenix to join Durant, it's just, he seems like one of those guys that maximizes and develops that kind of telekinetic connection with the players that he's out there with. I liked the pyrotechnics there. That was a little Walt Frazier of you. You're getting on the thesaurus, and I love it. Better than comparing him, Grayson, to Steve Nash, which I personally was in the room for and knew Frank was just goofing around, but now people use it against him, which I don't know how that happened, but yeah. So with Royce last night, to me, he a few things jump out, and a lot of it can definitely be traced back to the IQ. So I think offensively, he just has an awareness of everybody else in a way that, I get why he gets called a point forward and why guys would like to play with him. There was a possession, several possessions. When I think as the game continued, they emphasized Nerk a little bit more, including in to start the third quarter, which maybe didn't go great, but it's at least executing what they're trying to do. And in those moments, O'Neal is like, okay, we ran something. Nurkic set a screen. They switched actions. Nurkic now has a mismatch. He's getting in position. I'm catching the ball. Maybe I could take a three, but the ball's already to Nerk by the time. Like it's a touch pass to him, just knowing what's going to need to happen there. Obviously, we've all seen the spontaneous, I don't even know how much it's mapped out, types of on-ball screens that he'll often just set to just create some flavor in the offense when things are getting stagnant. And I think that this team could really benefit from that at times. I think having a quick trigger is a skill in and of itself, even though, again, we saw a cold stretch from him, but really he didn't shy away from it. And that kind of has to happen, especially when you're getting into a playoff situation. You can't afford to waste a possession because you're tentative when a contested three might be better than over moving the ball or turning it over or something. And then defensively, I think, they all talked about his communication being really a difference maker. I'm not in there. I'm not going to pretend to trace everything back to Royce, but I don't think it's a coincidence that their transition defense has gradually improved. I think it was there before he came, but it feels like he probably has added to that. I think the other thing, though, is their off-ball switching has become a lot more locked in, and you feel them being more comfortable, I would say, Stephen, just taking risks and kind of maybe getting out of position a little bit and overcorrecting, because I think they're developing a little more trust with each other to say, hey, we can overhelp, or we can over-rotate or switch something that might not feel comfortable and get back out of it, or protect ourselves, cover for ourselves in ways that I don't think they had, even when maybe, they were putting a Kogi out there more or whatever, the defensive personnel. I don't even think we saw it then. So I think on both sides, Royce's versatility and that IQ are huge. And I just think that's going to give you so many more options, even with how great of a season Grayson has had. So that was there's a lot there, but I mean, I just think, to me, it's kind of staring them in the face to at least get this guy on the court with these stars more, even if, at the end of the day, it might not matter who actually starts.
Yeah, and I think you made some very great points in that, especially kind of speaking more to the offensive side. I think there is more food left on the table in terms of the usage that they can get out of Royce O'Neale on offense. Obviously, usage with him is not specifically with him having the ball and taking the ball out of the big three's hands, or use of Nurkic's hands for that matter. More so just looking at the advantage creation dynamic of everything that he quickly processes. A play breaks down on the first side, it gets swung to the second side, and the Suns always have that record scratch moment in flow where everybody's looking around and they're trying to reset and regenerate a new pace, new tempo, or a new advantage in the late clock. I go to a rep from last night where he got a 3-point opportunity topside where the ball got swung to the second side to Devin Booker. He immediately goes to set a ghost screen, gets a little bit of a reaction at an on ball, but also I believe it was Donovan Mitchell who was guarding him. And as he relocates to pop topside, the pace at which it occurs puts Donovan Mitchell a half beat behind schedule. And for him, he has a quick trigger. So he gets the catch, realizes he has the space, and he's able to lace him up and knock it down from straight on for, I think, maybe his second 3-pointer in that game. And if you rewind about maybe 2.5, 3 minutes prior to that, he got another opportunity where he created an opportunity for Bradley Beal late in the shot clock in the corner off of ghosting on the ball. Ghosted to the wing this time, got a reaction on ball. They were in short recover with Donovan Mitchell. He popped to the unoccupied space, and the dominoes fell defensively. Darius Garland had to jump off of Bradley Beal in the corner to account for the ball, plus one pass. Bradley Beal wide open for 3. I think those little things in advantage creation, in addition to him just understanding leverage when he's setting screens, he understands when to set them, when to pop, and when to obviously slip. But understanding also the angles at which he needs to create an advantage for teammates in those contexts of offense. There's just so much invaluability to everything that he brings. And like you mentioned in the onset of the Royce O'Neale topic, it all just kind of finds a way to lend itself right back to that overarching point in IQ. You just can't replace IQ. You can't really teach IQ. It's just about a player's feel for the game and it kind of playing out in multiple contexts.
All right. Royce O'Neale, love letter over. We'll see what happens. He's going to play a lot either way. There was a weird stretch there where he was getting like 10 to 15 minutes. It feels like whatever that experimentation was, or just whatever that pattern of games was, has been put to rest. So he's going to be huge in the playoffs, and we'll see what role he does play. Next, I will let Stephen sort of introduce himself even more to the show by, I don't know if anyone values Jusuf Nurkic more in the Suns online fan community than Stephen. So I will let you nerd out about Nerk as a way of introducing yourself. And then I do want to hear your Suns fandom, Suns interest, whatever it might be, story, because you're not local right now. So I got to poke around at that. So we'll get into that all coming up in just a second. First, today's show brought to you by the Amazon Fire TV. Fire TV is your destination for sports. From live games to highlights to in-depth analysis, Fire TV offers amazing viewing experiences on smart TVs, as well as the Fire TV stick that you can just plug into your existing TV and get access to millions of movies, TV episodes, as well as, once again, free and live television, including the wide world of sports, whether that is the opening weekend, opening month for baseball, the college basketball tournament coming to a close, the pro basketball playoffs coming soon, and beyond. Fire TV also recently created Fire TV channels to deliver a constant supply of the latest videos from your favorite sports brands, all for free, including us here at the Locked On Podcast Network. Fire TV channels let you dive into all the game analysis, highlights, and more to keep up to date on all the latest in the world of sports. Not to mention great news, entertainment, gaming, travel, cooking, and beyond videos as well. Check out Fire TV channels on Fire TV and Alexa devices. And if you haven't checked them out yet, go to Amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV to do so. Trust us, not just Locked On. You know, of course, we're going to pump up our own stuff, but there is endless content over on the Amazon Fire TV. Today's show also brought to you by Nissan. and their wonderful array of SUVs. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further? Have you ever wondered what adventure could be around the next corner? Well, our friends at Nissan have a lineup of SUVs with the capability to take your adventure to the next level. The 2024 Nissan Rogue is perfect for city drives and great escapes. With class-exclusive Google built in, you have an always updating assistant to call on for almost anything. Gone are the days of connecting your phone and poking around on the screen while you're supposed to be focusing on the road. Instead, Google Assistant, Google Maps, and Google Play Store are built right into the 12.3-inch HD touchscreen infotainment system, making it easier to use than ever. 2024 Nissan Rogue is the perfect mid-size crossover for your next adventure. In addition, the 2024 Nissan Armada will change what you expect from a full-size SUV. Picture a rugged 4x4 that can seat up to 8 in first-class luxury and style. Tow bigger, explore further in the 2024 Armada. Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. Alrighty, Steven, let's close it out. Okay, let me think of how to pose the Nurkic side of things here. What about his role and the way he's developed alongside this group do you think is going to be most valuable come playoff time?
Well, a lot like with Royce O'Neale, just in different contexts, and it just hits different because of the position he plays and the size he has. His IQ, the way he processes the game, the way he understands how to create new advantages, maintain advantages, and even execute within them with his skill. I think unless you're inserting Nikola Jokic into the Suns' offense, it doesn't get much better than Jusuf Nurkic in terms of a piece that complements everything process-wise without having names and players attached to the offensive process for the Suns. Nothing really complements that better, but also he complements the big three in terms of skill. For all that they like to do, it requires movement or pick and roll play. And who's setting all of those screens for those players and doing so effectively? It's Jusuf Nurkic more often than not. And I think it gets monotonous because you see him play over the course of almost 82 games now, doing these things over and over. But that doesn't take away the volume at which he's able to execute that in those contexts matters. In the pick and roll, setting those screens for players to get open, getting to freedom with 2 or 3 dribbles, or to engage the opposing big man that's guarding Nurkic. So now when he rolls, either it's a late switch or he's got advantage play in a short roll where he's obviously optimized. And now you got the defense rotating. All of these things, in addition to the Gortat screens that he's setting. After he sets a screen on ball, the guard comes off and engages the opposing big, and they get back, and he's able to set a screen on his own man, and then that enables Devin Booker opportunities at soft touch floaters for and-ones, like we saw in the game against the New Orleans Pelicans and things of that nature. Just those little things that he does on offense is just so connective. I think hubs and connectivity for fives, and specifically in this era of the NBA, is as important as anything. He has that in spades, and he processes the game well in addition to that. And I think the last thing on him, he's just such a great teammate. You see how receptive the players are to him, whether that be on social media, whether it be the coaches speaking about him in press conferences or the players. Everybody's receptive to him. He has a friendly type of gravity to him. And again, when you're talking about building out a roster to contend, there's going to be lows, there's going to be highs, and there's going to be those spots in between. And he addresses all 3 of those with a positive attitude.
Yeah, I don't think you can say enough about how well he's just fit in all the ways that word could be defined here, right? I mean, even just like staying healthy, which was a question mark, but also I love the chip he has on his shoulder about, like, he's aware of his perception, and that starts with the health and the doubt about his ability to stay on the court and play big minutes and this and that, and you can tell he kind of gets frustrated when he has to address that because he just doesn't think it's fair. And I mean, great, like I'm all for guys, going to bat for themselves, of course. So I think all of it is, and the selflessness on the court goes a long way, right? I mean, there are limitations to what Nurkic is, just like there are for a lot of players, but you can tell that him sacrificing and doing so many things to make other guys better or cover for them or do things that are not glamorous doesn't go unnoticed. And I think that's a really big deal, that even if it might not feel like it, kind of like you said, if it's just happening every night and it isn't glamorous, we can overlook it, but it is important. All right, so some nerding out about IQ was a great way to set us up for this. But how did you come to be following the Suns, care about the Suns? What is your origin story here for the people who have heard you on podcasts, seen you on Twitter, but maybe don't know, including me?
Yeah, for sure. So I actually started watching the Suns when I was younger. I was always long story short, I played point guard. I've always been kind of in positions of leadership. And one of my favorite point guards was Steve Nash. So going back to the obviously D'Antoni 7 seconds or less era, I didn't necessarily fathom what 7 seconds or less was. I just like the style of play. Like, you got this point guard, he's got all the skills in the world, coming off a pick and roll. And at that point, I'm in like middle school. So naturally, I'm in those positions, running a lot of pick and roll, figuring out how to make passes, read defenses, how to navigate as a smaller guard. On top of that, that's kind of where the inception of my gravity towards the Suns started with the Steve Nash era. And even before that, honestly, I'm from the same hometown as Michael Finley. So when I was growing up, when I was younger and I was going to Michael Finley's basketball camp, I think he had just got from Phoenix to Dallas, if I'm not mistaken. So I kind of knew of his origin with the Phoenix Suns and everything, and just kind of following his career. So really between those two pillars, Steve Nash and Mike Finley, that's when my inception with the Suns started. And then it kind of picked up a little bit more. Once my favorite player of all time, Chris Paul, got traded from the Oklahoma City Thunder to Phoenix, and everything that came with that, rekindling the flame with Monty Williams, like all of that fun stuff. Same thing with Willie Green being on the sidelines and all of that. So that's really where it all started for me. And that was also at the same time where I was getting done with college, and I was just trying to figure out, okay, what team do I want to cover to lay my foundation and expand upon that. Naturally, being able to, by way of Zoom, for opportunities like these, and also covering teams in the W and whatnot, just compiling those opportunities kind of led for me to cover the Suns and start kind of spreading my seeds in terms of just sharing my knowledge and also learning on the fly with it all. So here I am today.
All right. So it's funny. Like I'm thinking of Streetcar, who people probably follow on Twitter too. I had him on the pod like 2 years ago, and I asked him the same question because he's from the Bay, and I was like, why do you care about this team? Same thing, Steve Nash. It's a universalizing experience, I think, to watch that dude. So I'm sure Suns fans can relate to that. But yeah, okay. So have you been to Phoenix?
I have not. I'll be there this summer for the WNBA All-Star game. So I'm looking forward to seeing what it's like out there and everything.
Rough time to have to be your first trip out here to do that in July. That's not ideal. That was my thought when they announced that. I'm like, great event, very excited to have everybody and host that, but also ignore what it feels like. Come back in March, come back in February, and it'll feel a lot better. But okay, no, that's awesome. So is there anything else people should know about you come at it from a point guard kind of perspective as a player, Chris Paul love. I feel like we're piecing it together. Is there anything else that people should know as they get ready to have your words in their ears every week?
That kind of really speaks for itself in terms of looking at the game through those, types of lenses. So I think that really says everything. I think the other thing is just to make sure that we're appreciating the players and the greatness that's taking place on a nightly basis across the entire NBA, but even more so with the Suns. I know as fans, people can get lost in the ups and downs, especially with the highs and lows that this particular team has had this season in comparison to the last 4 seasons. Nonetheless, an all-time great in number 35 is walking in and is tearing down scoring records I think he's played 89 games now as a Sun, and he's already like shattering scoring records, ascending up the ranks in terms of scoring in a season and all of these different things, in addition to the all-time great work that he's continuing to ascend upward in. Make sure you're appreciating the greatness and the talents that are on this roster at the moment. Might not necessarily be adding up to the team that your expectations might have been for them, but they're still a team that is going to have to be dealt with come playoffs. And obviously, ultimately, you're building for the playoffs, not necessarily the regular season. So, allow for them to take their lumps in this regular season stretch. They're definitely in a better place now than they were even just 3 games ago. But yeah, just make sure you're appreciating the greatness that's taking place on the floor at the moment.
I love it. I need that reminder as well. So you might not have meant it for me, but it landed for me because, not only do, I I watch every day just like everybody else, but it's also like, imagine pulling your hair out over watching and then you have to give some kind of take. I'm not complaining. It's an awesome opportunity to get to do this show, but it is nice to recenter and be like, yeah, this is cool. The 89 games, that is a crazy number to hear. That has flown by, the amount of games that KD has played here. It feels like it was a couple days ago that we were like, is he going to be ready for the playoffs? What was the trade like? And now here we are. It's been a year. So, okay, well, it'll be great. We have one more show of the regular season for Steven and I next week. And then after that, we'll either be recapping what happened in the first play-in game or we will be getting ready for the first round, one way or another. So definitely hitting the ground running. Should be very, very fun. You can also check out Steven's writing over at Bright Side of the Sun on the Suns. His Twitter will be in the show description as well as on the screen if you're on YouTube, so you can keep up there if you don't already. This is it for the week. I'll be back for the Locked On Suns Insiders, a video watch back of, I think I'm going to do the third quarter of Suns Cavs, so that's just a video watching back, as it's called, the quarter and what happened in it, and then hopefully more. If the game against the Wolves goes as well as maybe we're all hoping, I'll do another episode there too. So hit follow or subscribe if you haven't. Sign up at the link in the show description to get the Locked On Suns Insiders text sent directly to your phone. And we'll be back next week.